Just as I was about to start filming, there was a police siren outside. It just dissipated. It may come back. All right, here we go. So, this is very exciting. We just started the 33 Strategies of War. Oh my God, it took a year, I want to say and a half, to finish the 48 Laws of Power. We went through semester 2 and through semester number 3, which is where we're currently at right now. So to start this new one, this new pilgrimage, and being a man who keeps his word, we're going to complete all of them. All 33 strategies. What I'm doing right now for my reading is I have a Bible that's holding this camera up. I'm on Numbers, so it's one of the very first books. I think it's like book 4. And then I'm reading this. That's the totality of my reading at this time. But I have the preface noted, and then I have the first strategy of war here on the stage left, on the right side. We're going to go through it, and through the preface you'll see the importance of why we're doing this book. I'm going to be honest, my energy level is down because I went to the gym this afternoon. Been sleeping super late. It's been very, very hard for me to fall asleep and then to wake up and then just to be on a normal sleep schedule. So I'm like staying up later than I'd like, waking up later than I'd like, starting my training later than I'd like, and then having a meal, working, and then going to the fight gym for my second training session, and then here we are. So my energy is what it is to start, and then it'll pick up as the lecture continues. So here we go. War. The problem is that we are trained and prepared for peace, and we are not at all prepared for what confronts us in the real world, war. And I thought that was very, very, very true. The first week when I stepped foot into a martial arts gym, particularly within the boxing class, I'm not a small person, 6'2", decently sized. You would think that if something were to happen, a confrontation, you would be equipped enough with zero knowledge of combatantness to be able to, diffuse the situation. And that could not be further from the truth. You think you're prepared. You think you would be able to, defend yourself, protect the people that you're with, ensure you'll have adrenaline and all these things in a street fight, a real altercation. But I learned very, very quickly from the first week of getting pummeled by 15-year-olds, like 15-year-old boxers, 15-year-old like these twins who they would do the jiu-jitsu class and they were doing the martial arts like boxing, and their favorite, I think it was jiu-jitsu, but I would also like in the warm-ups they'd be doing Muay Thai, and they were just these killers. They're so sweet kids, awesome kids, and they beat the shit out of me the first week. And they're half my size and half my age, and you don't know what to do with your hands. You don't know how to distance yourself. You don't know how to maximize, long reach that you have. You don't know what you don't know. And so when it comes to the street, you don't know shit. And it's fascinating because Andrew Tate articulates this, that at the end of the day, everything that is keeping our society together is the underlying notion that violence can ensue at any time. That's what's keeping civility. As in the reason that two men remain cordial when they talk, when they have a discord, when they have a conversation, is because both of them know that if things were to escalate, and slights were made, disrespects came across, then it can result in physical confrontation, physical violence. That's what it will always escalate to. And he uses the example, like say you get a ticket from a cop and you choose not to pay it, then they send the bailiff and you tell them to fuck off, and then they send these people, and then they put out your bounty, whatever, for your arrest, and then you refuse. Eventually it's going to turn to violence. Eventually they're going to go to your place, handcuff you, and then take you off. Like eventually it all ends with violence. Or you can take COVID as an example, when they would literally, cops would be walking outside fucking armed, making sure that people stayed in their house to abide by a fucking curfew. Like at the end of the day, the underlying reality is violence, is war. We live in a bubble of comfort often, due to the generational cycle. So it goes, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men. For a lot of us, particularly around my age bracket, so give or take, we've been living in very, very comfortable times. Not a real war, not a real calamity, not a real hardship at all that we've had to endure. No fucking 1930s Dust Bowl. You know what I'm saying? It's been very, very relaxing relative to history. Like, you're not a medieval peasant trying to combat the plague. You know what I'm saying? But because of that, we are so ill prepared for actual battle, for actual war. And the reason that I wanted to do this book, and one of the greatest reasons that I knew this summer that I would have to learn and take up martial arts training, is because I know with my path, with my destiny, with what God has called me, charged me to do, who He's charged me and called me to be, I know that my voice is going to be something that I can't lack conviction with my rhetoric, with my oratory. I know my voice is kind of masked right here. These walls are pretty thin. I'm renting a room right now in Argentina. But I learned from even my last job that most people, and this was me in my youth, they lack either the intelligence to defend themselves within their speech, or they lack the courage to do so. And so they'll be given onslaught of abuse and harassment and injustice and treachery and deception from their peers, from their shitty superiors. But because of fear of intimidation, fear of not wanting to, stir the water, fear of losing their job, which is always the biggest one that's on people's mind, they let these bully motherfucker faggots coerce them into submission. And in my last job, I made that a precedent that is a stand that I refuse to take. Like, I said that so bluntly to these snakes, that I have no qualms losing my job on the basis of integrity. And when you do that, you shine a light on their treachery, but also you have the courage to step into the arena against motherfuckers that think they're an intellectual combatant when they're it's as if you're versing a child. And I learned that in real time. And so it's very, very, very important that we arm ourselves for the battle that is inevitably coming. And if you don't think it is, then you're going to be one of the ones. It's actually a quote from here from Sun Tzu. Not to jump ahead. It says, "Don't depend on the enemy not coming, depend rather on being ready for him." Like, if you don't think your entire life is going to be a mental warfare, you're in for a tragedy in your trajectory. You're in for a lot of dismay. You're in for a lot of hardship, struggle. That's the whole game. The whole game is failing forward. The whole game is struggling in adversity. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve. That's how we ascend on our journeys, on our paths. So if your thinking is going to be all comforts, then you're going to be a very, very weak individual. Why? Because it's from discomforts that elicits your growth. You know what I'm saying? When you go to the gym, is doing rep ranges and sets and weights and rest periods that you're super comfortable with, is that enough stimulus to elicit any sort of change or transformation within your body, within your physique, within your muscularity or strength? No, right? Why? Because it's comfortable. That quote, that's cliche, but the comfort zone is a nice place, very beautiful, but nothing grows there. Okay, so that's why it's such a big problem. And I like how they worded it. The problem is that we are trained and prepared for peace. When you go to school, you are indoctrinated to be compliant and obedient and docile, so that when you leave school and you go into the workplace, you are compliant and obedient and docile. And you live in a constant state of fear. Fear. You're led by fear, not truth, not justice, not accountability, not honesty, not transparency, not integrity. Fear. That's garbage. That's us getting away from our true selves, away from authenticity, away from us operating in our light. Okay. So in this book, he talks about what you're going to get out of it. And he says practical knowledge on how to deal with conflict on the daily battles that we face, how to be more rational and strategic when it comes to conflict, channeling our aggressive impulses instead of denying or repressing them. I remember there were days at my old rat life job where I was fuming, because I didn't have an outlet. And I was in such a shitty, presumed checkmate position. As in, I was getting abuse from my superior, I was getting abuse from these other people, I was getting this harassment, this bullying, they were illegally colluding to try to get me fired, and these serpent snakes oversaw human resources. So I couldn't go to human resources to report them because that report, and I saw this, would go to that person, and then they would just be able to tear it up. Like it was such a shit show of an organization, all from the horrific leadership that was at the very, very top. And you can even go from above the top and beyond the superintendent, who was a super cuck of a leader. The board, who I shared with you in a prior video, one of them was arrested for pedophilia. And that is the reality of that kind of organization. My serpent snake was the mentee of that person. And so you can see the zest and the disgust that goes all the way to the top. And those are the people in these positions of authority who are the horrific leaders, who are the worst examples of what it means to operate and reside within leadership. Okay? But you have to understand that that's more often than not who you're going to be subject to when you're a courtier within the rat life. You're going to be subject to these fucking pedophiles, to these snakes, to these serpents, who are going to abuse their position because they're very weak individuals. They're very insecure, and especially when you're intelligent, especially when you're good looking, when you're younger than them, they're half their age, or you're not a fat fuck like most of them are, you're so threatening to their security because they're such insecure losers. And when I say losers, I mean the kind of people that you would literally like punch outside of that fucking office because they're the biggest fucking nerds and cucks. But I digress. But it's very, very important, that second point, which is how to be more rational and strategic when it comes to conflict, channeling our aggressive impulses instead of denying or repressing them. I would turn to God. That was the only way that I could unload that burden. I would go on my walks and I would plead to him. I would say, I don't know how much longer I can take this. Because when you're trying to be free and you're doing whatever you can, I love the quote that, and I'm currently living in it in real time, being here in Argentina right now. It's the quote, you should do what you need to do as quickly as possible so you can spend the majority of your life doing what you actually want to do. And most people don't do that. They do the reverse. Most people spend 40 years doing nothing, doing the bare minimum, accepting the breadcrumbs so that they can spend the least amount of years doing what they actually want to do, the least amount of years free. And that's the bill of goods that you're sold on to work the corporate rat life ladder and climb that shitty game. Is let me forfeit all of my youth, all of my vitality, all my dreams, all my ambitions, all my passions, all of my uniqueness, everything that makes me authentic and a gift of a person, of an individual. Let me forfeit all of that for the sake of loyalty, for the sake of fucking safety, for the sake of being led by fear, for the sake of being indoctrinated and conditioned and programmed to be afraid, to operate in fear, that you're so afraid to even try because you're afraid to fail. What happens if I go broke? What happens if this business doesn't work? What happens if I don't know about booking that flight for that trip or quitting my job? You know what I'm saying? Because you don't have a plan B, C, D, E, F, G. When the reality of it is, your life begins when you take that leap, when you go on your hero's journey, when you have the courage to pursue, which is the entire soliloquy of what rat life is. Anyone can escape, anyone can live free. But you have to have the courage to, number one, you have to have belief that it's possible. And then that will become that freedom is possible for you. But also the courage to pursue and to keep pursuing until, as in I could have given up and quit at any time at my old job. And I refused to. I said, I'm not going to give up. There's no fucking way. And I'm gonna cut ahead. Actually, it's the next line. If you want or deserve anything, you must be ready and able to fight for it. If you want or desire, I can't even read my own writing. If you want or desire anything, you must be ready and able to fight for it. And I put the quote from Mulan, you're unsuited for the rage of war, and then I'll sing that little jingle. So if you want or desire anything, you must be ready and able to fight for it. The way that I think it works is, from my observations, from my personal experience, I think God checks to see if you're actually about it or if you're just talking shit. I remember in 2022, I told God, I said, I'm going to prove to you my actions are consistent with what I say I want. And that was regarding the kind of woman that I wanted. I said, I'm going to prove to you with my actions they're consistent with what I say I want. I want this caliber, this quality of woman. I'm not going to be this caliber, quality of man. I'm not going to be entertaining these people. I'm not going to be, texting and DMing people like this. I'm not going to be operating in any sort of less than honor, less than integrity, less than good character, less than a good man, the best man that I can be. Because I've always tried to be that man. I shared this with Marcelo, who's my boxing coach, who invited me over for Christmas dinner. And I told him, I said, you have no idea how many years it's been since I've wanted to earn my right to sit at the table of made men. And to be sitting at your table, that he invited me open-armedly for Christmas dinner, who is a professional Brazilian fighting champion. It was, the journey had come such a long way from when I remember who my circle of influence was in 2022, 2023, 2024. They were drug addicts, and they were fucking losers, and they were friends or roommates of OnlyFans models, and they were alcoholics, and they were just depressants, and they were just negative, and they were just the people who I loved when they were intoxicated. As in when we would do the vice or the indulgence, whether it was mushrooms or whether it was a festival, whatever it was, a psychedelic, I loved who they were and who their soul was, not the personality and character and insecurities and limiting beliefs and childhood trauma and all of the bullshit that came when they sobered back up. All of that hatred for themselves projected outwards. I didn't like any of that shit. All their fears coming back. I hated all of that fucking cowardice, and I hated all of the hypocrisy. That was the biggest thing for me. For someone who now, ridding myself of all those people, I surround myself with just champions, with men of character, with women of character, with men of honor, with of duty, responsibility, just leaders within their family, within their community, within themselves. And I hated being around people who made me feel like a fucking hypocrite for the people who I was tolerating. Because I said, you are a reflection of my standards, and you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. By association, by fucking proximity, I'm one of you losers, and I was. Oh man, I didn't have pride in my appearance. I didn't have any sort of shame in my actions and but I was lost trying to find my way. I was trying to find the path, and I was always in the pursuit of freedom, of personal development, of growth. And so I don't shame myself or use the past as a baton to beat myself to death with. I wouldn't be the person that I am today had I not gone the path that I went. So it's very, very important wherever you are on your journey home, your journey to authenticity, your journey to tapping into your highest self, your journey on your quest for freedom, that you're not using any mistakes or shortcomings or neglects or oversights as a baton to beat yourself to death with. That's the best food for thought, food for consideration I could impart on you. Use it as a tool to learn from, and then it happened for you. Do you know what I'm saying? For your benefit, for your betterment. Got it? But the quote that I wanted to say from Mulan, you're unsuited for the rage of war, when I say, I believe God in life, your universe, your reality, really tests you to see if you're about it. As in, I was just talking shit in 2022 when I said I wanted this woman, while meanwhile I was doing these kind of actions or entertaining these people or having fucking rosters or this kind of just straight garbage. And so I was just talking shit, as in I said I wanted this, but your actions don't reflect that whatsoever. So no, you don't actually want that. You're just talking shit, okay? There's a scene in Mulan where she's trying to do the training and she's falling behind. She can't do any of it. She can't keep up with anything. And then he says, you're unsuited for the rage of war. So pack up, go home, you're through. How could I make a man out of you? I swear to God on my path, God is my witness, I've been given that same taunt, that same challenge, that same gauntlet thrown down. As in, you're not really about it. You're just going to give up. You're just going to quit, kind of a deal. Just get the fuck out of here. I swear that's how God operates. As in, to see if you really have that intestinal fortitude to persevere, because the road ahead is way too hard. If you're willing to give up and to quit at the first fucking adversity, the first roadblock, the first obstacle, you're trying to drive from LA to Oregon, to Portland, whatever, to San Francisco, and there's one road closed, one fucking detour, and you're just like, I guess that dream wasn't for me. And then you turn around and, dude, really? That's all it took was one red light, one fucking train crossing for you to say, I laugh, but that's people's actual will. And there's a video by Dana White. He said there's going to be a hungry group of savages in the coming future who run over these pussies. And it's from the generational cycle. So most young people today, they're so emotionally brittle and weak because they've never been through any kind of fire. They've never gotten any scabs. They've never gotten any hurt. And you can see it. You can see it in their lack of grit. You can see it in how soft that they are emotionally. They're emotionally weak. You can see who was never disciplined as a child. I'm not saying you have to have the same discipline that was imparted on me or my siblings, But if you look at older generations, there's a recurring theme of the ones who were actually given the belt, given a firm hand, given a spanking at the very least. And there are these, I paused here, because we're, abuse. There are these people of genuine character. And I even see it from the last country that I was in, the Brazilians. It's like, they were disciplined as children. And they're just these teddy bears of these good, wholesome people. It didn't make them violent. It made them honorable. It made them disciplined. It made them, when you go to a grocery store, you don't have the child screaming at the parent, which you see in Western culture. Dude, you'll see a kid throwing a tantrum, screaming, shouting at the top of their lungs. And you look at them, and all you do is look at the parent, and you just say, dude, what the hell are you doing? Because there's a good quote, what you tolerate is how you teach others how to treat you. You're setting the precedent, the standard of what kind of behavior is okay. My point is this. God does the same thing with us. He tests us to see if we actually want it or not. And I know that's kind of a segue from, the standards for raising a good and honorable child, but there you go. Sorry for the noise outside. It's very, very true. And I've gotten that on my path where I didn't want to do something. I didn't want to go here. I didn't want this. This is, but I've gotten to the point where I've changed my rhetoric and my internal narrative. And this is a little secret and a tip and an Easter egg I can give you on your journey. I learned this from Daryl, who channels the entity Bashar. There's nothing that I've resonated more with truth than his videos. And he says the way the universe works is it loves and supports you unconditionally. That's how God works. It is unconditional support. It's the reason why you need to be very, very careful with your speech. Because if you're saying you want to start a business, you want to pursue this endeavor, you say, this is going to be very hard. God says, yeah, sure, it is going to be hard. I'm going to unconditionally, do you understand what that means? I'm going to support you without any conditions. Even if you say it's going to be hard, it is. Our first book in this university, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, as you think, so you are. And I would do that within my martial arts training. I said, man, this fucking road ahead is going to be so brutal and miserable and dreadful and, all this agonizing. And then I caught myself and I said, absolutely not. I'm not going to have that belief unconditionally supported by God, by the world, by my angels and spirits in the universe. I said, this is going to be fun. This is going to be so much fun. And I'm experiencing that belief system like a prism. Your beliefs manifest in your 3D reality, reflected back to me in real time. This past week's training, last week's training, so much fun. I went to the MMA class yesterday, not a single person showed up. I got to have Caesar. It was so awesome the way he introduced me the first day, because he predominantly speaks Spanish and Portuguese. And then, we bridged the gap of what your name is. And he was like, Caesar. Like, with the crown. And he did that whole gesture. Caesar. He's so awesome. But I got him all to myself for a fucking hour yesterday doing MMA training. And it's so cool because he trains with the professional fighters. And I do the class that's right after they're done training. And there's nothing that they're doing that I know that I can't learn, or a level that I know that I won't be able to operate in the very near future. And it's so cool that I'm getting trained by this master in real time. And you know what my only thought is when I'm in this class and I'm having so much fun? Not simply the reflection of my belief system, which I was aware of, but I said, how the fuck is no one taking advantage of this? And I had that exact same feeling when I was in Brazil. My Muay Thai instructor, 25 years he's been doing Muay Thai. If you were to see him knee or kick the fucking bag, and you're just like, Jesus Christ, imagine if a person was on the other end of that, they would be dead. And there's one person that shows up to the class. And this guy's willing to stay with you for an hour after the class, answering any question that you could possibly have. The generosity is insane. But then I want to give you another piece of food for thought, which is just complete truth. It comes from The Alchemist. When you know what your personal legend is, your personal legend, your life's calling, your purpose, your destiny, okay? The whole world, the universe, conspires to help you achieve it. I'm experiencing that in real time with all of my different professors and teachers and fight instructors and martial arts masters. When I'm going on my path, when I'm traveling to these different gyms, I just so happen to join a class that just so happens to be exactly meeting me where I am, teaching me what I need to know at this very time. I'm never behind. It's perfect synchronicity. I'm always on time with the teacher that I need, in the class that I need, on the day that I need to be there. It's just, and everywhere I go, it's exactly who I need. Dude, when I say conspires, dog, it's insane. And then that's how you know that you're walking in obedience. You're walking in flow. So I know I'm hammering the preface of this book, but I want to give you, there's no gatekeeping here. So any insight that I've been privy to, that I've gleaned on my journey, I just want to impart. If you're not at that level where this is all resonating, because this isn't a belief system that you have, and therefore your reality doesn't reflect that belief system. When it does one day, these will be good seeds that we're planting right now that you can just ruminate, I don't know the word, where you can just think on and reflect on and ponder and consider. Food for thought for now. But eventually, if your belief system changes to the whole world is conspiring to help me achieve my goal, life always happens for me, which these were belief systems I didn't get until I had gone through the vast majority of my season of refinement. Once you can no longer do the journey on your own, and you get to a point where you have to be in complete surrender to God, I found that's where that belief system shifts, because you've done the road of just pure grind, of pure uphill force and upstream swimming and climbing. And I remember in my last job, I for 18 months straight, every single day trying to get a new job. And it was 14 interviews, fail. I did everything that I possibly could every single day of the week to try to get an elevated rat life position. Sorry for the noise that might be coming. To which God perpetually said no. And then it was it takes me sometimes a while to learn something, from the 100th, 14th fucking no, to be like, oh, this is just redirection. He doesn't want you to go this way. Why? If I was in the rat life right now, my entire 30s and beyond would have been forfeited. My entire destiny, nature's design, highest good, everything. And so that is what was required, and all of the pain that I endured from that last job, to force the understanding and the surrender to that belief system that life happens for you. Because since I've been on the other end of all of that harassment and the investigations from my snake serpent superior working, colludingly to intentionally get me fired, that was all a gift. Because if it wasn't for her actions, I would still be in that fucking office, or I would be in an elevated position, and then have committed to that life, which is a deal that I made with God. I said, I have no problem forfeiting my destiny to be a better provider for my family. That was a deal I was willing to make, and he stepped in and said, no. So it all comes from your belief systems. It's very, very important. I want to plant that seed, food for thought. But to finish that quote, you're unsuited for the rage of war. God will test you to see if you're really about it. And most people, they're not. Most people are just talking shit. And Andrew Tate, he articulates this and he says, if you actually wanted it, you would have it, but you don't actually want it. You're just talking shit. You just say you want it, but you're not willing to do the work involved in order to achieve it. There's a quote by Grant Cardone. Most people will limit their potential success. The people who limit their potential success, they limit the amount of work required in order to achieve it. I know I kind of butchered it, but it's so true. People who say, oh, I don't really want to be free. I don't really want to earn more. What they're saying is, I don't want to do the work required and involved in order to achieve that. I don't want to become the person that's required in order to have that dream come to fruition in reality. They're just talking shit. They don't actually want it bad enough. You know what I'm saying? So if you say something to God, you say, I want to be free. You have to be willing to pay the ultimate price. And I don't want to go to super extremes, but I was willing to give my life for freedom, and I still am. And I say that to myself every day. I said, what do you want? I say, I just want to be free. Free in all sense. Geographic freedom, financial freedom, relational freedom in the sense that there was a girl who I met in Spain. She said something, I was consoling her on a breakup that she had gone through with some dude that she was dating for like 3 years. And she said, I was losing my essence with him. And I love that word that she said, my essence. And it's very true. People who are in relationships that they disrespect themselves when they presume to be a person that they think the other person would like, and then they're just betraying their own truth. You're losing your own essence to try to people please somebody else. And you see that happening all the time in relationships, where people will betray their truth. They'll disregard their boundaries. They won't have any boundaries. They'll tolerate an abundant amount of disrespect. And I was even that person when I was younger. I would tolerate disrespect. I would absorb people's projection. Mostly for the quote, there's a really good quote from How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Don't measure others by the yardstick of your own years. And so I would have to be very, very patient with a lot of people who didn't have that healing, and so they would emotionally project on me their insecurities, fears, limiting beliefs, doubts, and I would be the mirror in all of my past relationships of just presenting the person with what they're doing, which is what Christ does for us. He's the ultimate mirror. So when you're acting in a certain way, and actually any person who you walk with or converse with in your physical reality, they're all a mirror for you. If you don't believe that, you're not harnessing your current reality to ascend, because you're not self-analyzing. So when you see someone who has this quality that you like, and that and then you kind of hate and resent yourself for this, I would do this all the time, you're abandoning yourself. And I learned that as well. So if I see someone who, like, there's a girl who, oh my gosh, she's pure sunshine, she's pure love and light, oh, I love that so much about her, and then I don't have that internal dialogue for myself, I reflect on this just the other day. It's like, no. You're seeing all of the qualities that you love about yourself. You just abandon yourself. You abandon those, and it's so awesome when you can actually reflect on the mirrors and then you utilize them as the gift that they are there for you to use. I articulated that with, I think precision, but it's very, 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 very true, and you won't be able to take advantage of that unless you're present, unless you're awake. Because otherwise they'll just go over your head. You'll just think, oh, that person's a dickhead. Oh, that person's this. When in reality, it's like, no, this person has a crazy ego. Oh my gosh. And then it's like, well, what ego have I operated in? This person is super, they just can't let go. I don't understand that. Why? It's so clear to me. All you have to do is let go. What am I not letting go of? Oh, this person, you're tolerating so much disrespect. What am I hearing right now? You let your girlfriend hold another guy's fucking hands or text or date, what? And then it's like, what disrespect am I tolerating right now? Every single person, circumstance, condition in your entire physical reality is all happening for you. They're all a mirror walking, trying to guide you home. Does any of that make sense? Okay, so you get the point. Don't talk, no, not snooze. Don't talk shit. Actually be about it. And when you actually do that, I'm just turning off the alarm that I had set, because I wanted to check something on my laptop that I need to work on after this. It's a good reminder for myself. Then you get to breakthrough. Then you're actually rewarded. Then God will conspire to help you get there. But, and this is actually a beautiful imagery, He cannot walk ahead of you. So if you're trying to have the courage to pursue your narrow path, but then you're just talking shit, oh man, it's too far, the sun is in my eyes, oh, I got the first road closed, then it's like, then your destiny will be forfeit. Sorry for, the dog that's barking. Does any of that make sense? We're moving on. Okay. Soldiers were not taught this is a beautiful quote. Soldiers were not taught strategy, for that would not have helped them on the battlefield. Besides, it was unwise to arm one's soldiers with the kind of practical knowledge that could help them to organize a mutiny or rebellion. Why is that quote so important? Education is freedom. Like that dog, if it was smart, it would... I learned this when I pivoted from Rat Life, the pre-workout, which is what's holding up this camera right now. I learned that the problem was education. That's the problem that we're trying to bridge. Why are so many people asleep? Why are so many people a slave? Why are so many people so detached from their highest self, from their godlike self? It's ignorance, it's naivety, it's illiteracy, financial literacy, it's emotional illiteracy, it's a lack of education. I said that's the problem that we're trying to bridge. We're trying to bridge the problem of education. You know what I'm saying? So, fascinating. And then there's another quote that I'm going to read that it's from Frederick Douglass during the time of slavery, from his book, Education is Freedom. And if you don't have, there's one of my favorite movies is The Professor and the Madman. And this guy, he's in a mental hospital, and he's this brilliant guy. Sorry for the noise. This brilliant guy. And I'm going to lose my train of thought. He's with a girl who he's kind of, psycho, I said. He's the madman. From his PTSD from the war, he murders this woman's husband accidentally, thinking he was one of his past enemies. He was having that hallucination. Not to ruin the movie for you, if you've never seen that movie, it's with Mel Gibson and I forget the name of the other actor, Sean Penn. Amazing movie. And he offers her a book or something, and she's like, I can't take this, and then she's gonna storm away. He's like, did I offend you? Don't leave. And then he's like, oh, you can't read. I'm so stupid for presuming that. And he said, I'll teach you. Okay, and he was trying to remedy that relationship, from robbing her of her husband and the one who was, her provider for her and her daughters. And he said, I'm in here, but I can read a book and I'm free. And he said, words are freedom. And I love words. I love language. I love poetry and literacy, and it's fascinating. And when I was younger, I didn't have that. I had that frustration from ignorance of expression. I could not articulate myself. I could not defend myself. I could not express my beliefs or opinions. And so you resort to this, the suppressed anger, or to name calling, or to profanity. And I developed my skill of articulation through reading personal development. I learned that from Jordan Peterson, actually. It's the best way to do it, is when you read, fully enunciate and articulate each word. You can even take it a step further and read the words out loud. I saw another video, and it was how to deepen your lexicon, which is your the base of your vocabulary. So most people, they have a 500 word lexicon. You can have, to separate yourself from so many other speakers, you can have a 3,000 word lexicon just by learning a few words that you can now funnel into your everyday vocabulary. English people, I would say English and Nigerian, they have there's such poetry to the way that they speak. They're so smart. They're so literate. They never stutter. The Nigerians, they're able to literally speak as if they're speaking poetry. It's are your ears for decoration? Did you not hear me? And British people, I love the way that they talk. They're so my favorite people. They're so smart, and I wish I had that vernacular and that poise in my speech. And maybe one day I will. But understand that words and education are freedom. And so if you lack the ability or even the courage to express yourself, I would highly recommend in your pursuit of freedom that is not a subject that you overlook or dismiss. Okay. Look at things as they are, not as your emotions color them. So I love this so much, and he breaks each one down. And this is kind of the preface for war. Fear will make you overestimate the enemy and act too defensively. Anger and impatience will draw you into rash actions that will cut off your options. Overconfidence, particularly as a result of success, will make you go too far. Love and affection will blind you to the treacherous maneuvers of those apparently on your side. Give your irresistible force, being unconquerable lies within yourself. I loved that breakdown because I've experienced that in any arena that I've embarked on. I remember it in video games. Fear, when you would queue against someone who was a Twitch streamer, and you're just like, oh my gosh. There's a quote from Batman, and he says, "You must become more than a man in the eyes of your opponent." He said, theater and deception are powerful agents. You must become more than just a man in the eyes of your opponents. And that's the reason why, is because fear will make you overestimate the enemy and act too defensively. And I would do that when you're queuing against someone who they have this name, oh my gosh, they're this streamer, oh my gosh, they're this person. You would play defensively. You would play out of fear. You would make mistakes. You do all this because you deem them as this god that they weren't, but they had that, I hate the younger generation overusing this word, but that aura, right? They ruined that word. It's the same with fighting. So when I would fight against somebody who was a monster, like in Brazil when I would spar against them, I would blow my fuel tank out of the gate, and I would overextend myself, and I would act very, very defensively when they weren't even doing anything, just because I was just always trying to anticipate how I was going to get, knocked out or submitted, and that's where all of the folly comes from, fear. But if I didn't fear them, if I just saw them not on this fucking pedestal and that horse that they rode up on, then you would actually bring them down to, they're just a man. They're not the bringer of rain as Spartacus, but very, very true. And you see that in any arena. You see that with fighters. You see that in video games. You see that in the way that politicians speak. You can see it on the campaign debates where this person is intimidated by this other person, and you'll see how they speak when fear is present, when they're being led by fear and intimidation, and they presume by their own belief system that this person is larger than life. Okay. Last point at the bottom. Elevate yourself above the battlefield. And so this is tapping into your highest self, and that's why it's such a power when it comes to strategy. And there's a video of a guy, he's a Stanford business professor, and he says, I think the highest form of intelligence is being able to design your life. And he's like, nobody talks about that, but being able to make a plan and a roadmap don't get me wrong, the roadmap will change. You'll make 1,000 alterations, pivots, iterations, but the destination is rigid. And he says the highest form of intelligence is being able to design your dream life, being able to design the life that brings you so much joy and fulfillment and ecstasy and passion. But I put higher self, emotional calm that comes from you going and having that 30,000 feet view, because you're out of the storms and the adversity of the day. There's a good quote by Greg Plitt. He's like, you're so buried in the trees that you can't see the forest. And when you've lost sight of your goal, and that's not in the forefront of your mind, all of a sudden there's so much weight to the hardship and struggle of today. But if you are so fixated on that horizon, on why you're here in the first place, this means would be so small. It'd be such an easy means to that end. There's a good quote by Viktor Frankl from Man's Search for Meaning. He said, a man who has a strong enough why can endure nearly any how. But if that why gets fuzzy, if you forget why the fuck you're here in the first place, then the how becomes unbearable. And then I put God, because that's exactly what it is. If you think of God as an energetic spectrum, when you tap into your highest self, you're able to access your divinity. And that's something that they try to separate us from. And it's very, very important that you're cognizant of that. When you're operating in anger, bitterness, shame, despair, doubt, fear, you're not tapping into your highest self. You're not accessing God. And don't get me wrong, I've had those conversations with God at my lowest, at rock bottom. He's going to be there with you regardless. But you know the feeling that I'm talking about when you're operating with such serenity and peace. That peace is covering you. Anxiety is ridden. How is your decision making? How is your clarity within your thoughts? How are you reacting, or are you responding to new information, to stress? When you're tapped into that divinity, you're in flow. You see things not as negative, positive. You see them as it is. It just is. You know what I'm saying? But people put those negative connotations on life circumstances, conditions, and events. And that is the folly of their belief system. They say, oh, I endured this. Oh, that must be a bad thing. I was arrested. I went to jail. I did this must be a bad thing. And it's like, what if that I had a drug overdose? This is a bad thing. What if that is the catalyst for whatever? What if the circumstance that you went through here builds you into this person who can now overcome this struggle, this adversity, this hardship? What if this lesson that you learned here, that you learned from and grew from, you can then impart that lesson on someone who's going through that same trial and tribulation? What if it happened for you? What if it wasn't a negative at all? You know what I'm saying? Understand that. It's all food for thought, but that's why it's important that God is tied into this note. Elevate yourself above the battlefield. To have the power that only strategy can bring, to focus on your long-term objectives, to craft an entire campaign, to get out of the reactive mode that so many battles in life lock you into. Keep your overall goals in mind always. Because what happens when you're under all of that turmoil and that stress? You are not calm. You're not stoic. I cemented my emotional control and stoicism because I didn't have a choice at my old job. Because the way that my serpent was intentionally trying to provoke me is she would yell at me, harass me, bully me, and then she would get, and this is what I learned in my reflection as I was driving into work one day, I said she's doing this on purpose so that she can get documentation of my provocation. And it's what manipulative narcissists do. They'll play the victim from your reaction, but then they'll never say their behavior that caused that reaction to begin with. They'll omit that little fucking bullet point, but then they'll play the victim. Oh my gosh, this person yelled or did this, when it's like, no, you know. And I learned that this is what this person was doing intentionally, conspiring with other leaders in the fucking organization to get this documentation, to get me fired. That when they tried to do that again and again and again, I was forced to be emotionally controlled and stoic, to not react to the abuse. And I had to just sit there and just be quiet and just be silent. And it's funny, if you've ever seen the movie The Imitation Game, where there's these bullies, they nail the actor, I don't know the actor's name. He plays Khan in Star Trek. He plays the dragon Smaug in The Hobbit. I forget the actor's name for the life of me right now. Very, very good. Benedict Cumberbatch. His younger version of himself at boarding school, he's getting nailed down underneath the floorboard of one of the classrooms. And then he's kicking and screaming and fighting, and then the bullies are getting a rise out of it, but then he just stops and he's quiet. And all of a sudden it loses its fun for these bullies. That is exactly what happened with my coworkers. When you stop feeding these fucking fat, sadistic trolls, they have nothing to feed off of. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's a good way for you to practice your cunning, because while they think they have you in a checkmate strategy, you win. You know what I'm saying? So, again, it's all food for thought, but that comes from emotional control and stoicism. And most people don't have that. Most people, they react, they show their hand, they show that they're triggered by this person, versus playing that long game. Playing that, and I would actually take it as a challenge when, say I was traveling, and I would have a conversation with somebody who was completely not aligned with any of my belief systems. They were so lost when I would be having conversations with them. And I would test myself to see if I could remain poised, if I can remain emotionally controlled, stoic, patient amidst such arrogance, ignorance, ego, stupidity, just all of those attributes that were just shouting out of somebody who is so broken, who is so lost, who is so misguided. And it all helped. Also, my articulation. When you have those discords with people who you do not agree with, and you refuse to allow yourself to resort to violence or to name calling, so you have to be able to craft and coerce, and marshal your forces to have conversations with people that you don't resort to those things. And so what is the result? You become a better speaker, a better rhetoric, better orator. You know what I'm saying? So with that, only 50 minutes in, that is the preface for the book, War. And now we'll get to war number 1. Declare war on your enemies. Okay, declare war on your enemies. Declare war on your enemies is the first strategy of war. Why? First bullet point. You cannot fight unless you can identify your enemies. There's a scene from Troy where Patroclus is murdered by Hector, right? Achilles goes to the gates. He goes under the gate of King Priam and he shouts for Hector. Hector eventually comes down. Achilles takes off his stifling helmet and he says, "Now you know who you're fighting." You cannot fight unless you identify your enemies. You learn that you can't shoot in the dark. You can't aim at something that you can't see. If you don't identify what the problem is or who the problems are, then you are not armed for a battle because you don't even know what boss that you're fighting. When I was working my rat life job and I would observe one of the serpents, one of the cuck snakes who would abuse and harass the people that this manager would oversee. And he would go into my serpent superior's office and then leave, and they would be laughing in that fucking room and then come out leaving unscathed. I said, dude, oh my God, he's so clever, he's so smart, he's manipulating the fuck out of it, and she's so blind to it, kind of a deal. I thought it was him, right? Because of the unconditional love and support that I imparted onto my serpent superior. And it wasn't until I finally woke up from that spell, from God eventually giving that discernment, and I said, oh my God, the abuse is her. It's her. This person who's doing this abuse is going to the office and he's getting a slap on the wrist. She's the one who's disregarding it. When I came to her and vocalized the abuse or the sexual misconduct that was happening to one of my coworkers from the guy that was arrested for pedophilia, and she did nothing about it. She's protecting these people. This is the fucking serpent snake, the head of the Hydra. And I was so naive to that. And I was so blinded to that. Just like in Legally Blonde. You know what I'm saying? Elle Woods was going in there, and then I didn't know that it was my very boss who was the serpent see you next Tuesday snake. And because of that, earlier on, I was that frog that was boiling over time. Because I could not fight unless I could identify my enemy. I didn't know that it was my very serpent superior, who was the biggest demon of this entire group. Okay. Because the abuse that she was imparting was slow and over time to me and to everybody else. It was a little disrespect here, and so what she had was everyone in a learned state of helplessness, particularly the managers. She conditioned them to tolerate her disrespect and her abuse in a public setting to where they would not call out disrespect and abuse that was imparted on anybody else because they had fear of reprimand. If they were to be like me, they would be a martyr. They would lose their job because she held it in captivity. She could threaten any single one of them to share my fate in real time, and they all, on a conscious or subconscious level, they knew that. They knew that, oh, if I challenge this, if I speak the truth, then I'm going to I'm going to share Tarek's fate. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's very, very interesting. The ones who reside in cowardice, the ones who set their lives up to where they have a job by necessity. I need this position because I have these bills and this debt and this mortgage, this whatever. But the way that I just positioned my life under God, I said, I have no qualms with losing my job on the fucking basis of integrity or truth. Do you know what I'm saying? And when you really operate within your light, within your divinity, trusting that you're guided, anointed, protected, you don't fear any of these faggots. You really don't. You don't fear anybody who's utilizing abuse And the definition of terrorism is using fear to manipulate and coerce others into a desired action. These fucking serpent terrorists, you don't bend the knee to them. You play the courtier, you play the long game, you operate with cunning, you operate with emotional control, but you don't allow them the victory in the end. And then you also omit the vengeance part and understand that vengeance is in God's hands, and that they were these oblivious and highly stupidly demonically possessed demons, vessels. They were all used as instruments for your good, right? But because of their stupidity, arrogance, ego, insecurities, demonic attributes, serpentry, treachery, deception, they were blinded to that. They were blind to the fact that it was by their very hubris that I would be liberated and elevated. You know what I'm saying? So it's all comes to that point. You don't know. If you can't identify your enemies, you don't even know who's attacking you, who's talking shit behind your back, who's all these things. And you don't know how to arm yourself and how to combat an enemy that you don't know that you have. Do you understand? And you think that this is irrelevant, but the reality of it is any person who's ever been in one of these rat-like jobs, they understand that whole court game. And that's what it is. I even said that to the attorney investigators. I referred to them as a court, because this was the fucking Queen of Hearts, and you had all of her little jesters, all of her little, the Wizard of Oz, the evil witch, and all of the monkeys. Like, it was the same thing. And that's such a recurring theme within the rat life. And I would go interviews at other school districts, and you think it's different. You walk into this HR department, and everybody's this passive-aggressive, see you next Tuesday. Everybody. That shit is in any industry. Do you know what I'm saying? Where you have to play these, there's passive aggression, there's projection, there's deception, even the rat life is a war that you have to maneuver and that you have to fight and that you have to battle. Otherwise, what happens is your soul is going to be on fire. If you don't have a position to be able to speak the truth, you are not free. If you can't defend against tyranny or injustice, you lack integrity. The one who doesn't call out injustice is just as guilty, if not more, than the one who's doing it. Why? Because you're permitting the behavior. As in, this person could be spared from this bullying and this harassment if you had the courage to fucking speak the truth or to call it out. But your cowardice is what's letting this stand. And my cognizance of that is what inspired me to vocalize and call out the treachery and the injustice to begin with. It was just my integrity, and there's a beauty about it of knowing who you are before God. Meaning, I remember going into the attorney investigations, and I was just like, there's such a calm that is covered over you when you know who you are on Judgment Day. As in, when you know that you're operating with love and with light and with good intentions and without malice or treachery or snakery, there's nothing these fucking people can do to you in this 3D reality. Because your soul is true. Your heart is true. Okay. The high points, and I put a big X next to this, the high points of politics are simultaneously the moments in which the enemy is, in concrete clarity, recognized as the enemy. And I put, each other. That's the biggest problem with media today is these sinister fagots have been able to convince us that it's you versus me. And I remember seeing a post on Instagram that was so beautiful, and it was this Russian guy, and he said, "We're brothers. I can't wait to meet you, brother." Because think of the indoctrination of every American for your entire youth, watching a movie from the 90s, the 2000s, the 80s, where every villain is a Russian character. Or you watch the news and it's like, oh man, Putin this, Putin that, and the communists, and then you actually meet a Russian person. And you're just like, oh wow, you're actually a very great character, great human being, honorable, loving, compassionate, kind, respectful, generous. And you're just like, wait a second. Oh, I was just getting brainwashed from somebody they wanted me to believe was my enemy. So that's the biggest problem within media, within the news, within social media, within newspaper, whatever the fuck, is they play it up of you versus you, Democrat versus Republican, man versus woman, all of this bullshit while they fuck you without you even knowing. And that's what they keep continuing to do. Let's get these sheep divided. Not only divided from themselves, but divided from our highest self, divided from our own divinity. And I saw this. I took a screenshot of it. How do you make someone have the worst mental health? Was the caption of the video. Lack of sleep. The number 1 was sleep deprivation. Number 2 was high stress. Number 3 was isolation. Number 5 was screen time. Number 6 was pornography. And number 7 was substances. And I said, how fascinating. How can you completely decimate someone's mental health? Number 1, lack of sleep. If you can make the cost of living in a society so high where people have to work 2 jobs and the husband and the wife have to work, then they're all under sleep deprivation and lack of sleep. Okay, so we got their mental health fucked there. High stress. When you are drowning in all of these debts and all these bills and all these obligations, and you don't have your freedom, and your soul is on fire from going to work, and you're in fight or flight because you don't know when you're going to get fired or get that pink slip, you're stressed all of the time. You're in survival mode, and if you're in survival mode, you can't be in creation mode. Okay, your mental health. Isolation. Modern dating is a good example. The way that they've succeeded within their propaganda, within the weapon of social media, within making brainwashing women to pursue higher degree, higher education, more pieces of paper, more made-up titles, their career, their elevated rise within the rat life, and then you see them in their 30s and mid-30s, miserable, depressed, alone. And you see the guys who are overlooked from social media and the unlimited options that are today, they get all of the rejection. There's a statistic on guys on dating apps and the percentage of the swipes that they get. And it was like a guy will get a coffee date. It was like within it was either 100 or like 500 or 1,000, like 1 in 1,000 swipes, because this many swipes gets you this many matches gets you this many that, filter through, and this many get you this coffee date. It was insanity. But my point is, it's isolation. They get you isolated today. What they've done is they've broken down the family unit. They've had women separate from their femininity. They've had men separate from their masculinity. They've had both of these parties work full time from the elevated cost of living. So who's raising your children? It isn't you. It's not the parents. It's not the wife who's staying at home, who's being a stay-at-home wife, stay-at-home mother, who's instilling the ideologies and beliefs that are shared within her partner. No. It's the school where they're being indoctrinated into being led by fear, into being docile and complacent and obedient and numb and distracted. It's breaking down in the mental health. Negativity. You can't open a social media app without an abundant amount of negativity. And don't get me wrong, you can, I've done a great job I built my algorithm brick by brick, but it's abundant. Gossip is abundant. People feed off of that. Off of negativity. Screen time. Dude, I'm guilty of this. I scroll way more than I would like on YouTube Shorts or on Instagram. And often if I do it too much, I delete the app. I'm just like, dude, this is rotting my brain. Pornography will make people, again, what you're doing is you're depleting yourself. Not TMI, not many people are gonna watch this video, but I just crested my, what's today? 81st. My 81st day of retention. Dude, one of the hardest things that I've ever done. And it's tied in with that, the mental health and the depleting. Because what I didn't know, what happens is if you're just, I saw, it was a video of a UFC fighter who was like, oh man, I didn't have a good prep. I was gooning all the time. Jesus. Crazy how that's allowed to speak like that in that fucking sport. Wild. Anyway, I didn't know that what you're doing is robbing yourself of your life force energy, like the power that you have to create life, that you're just depleting yourself of. And what I've noticed is you get a heightened sense of consciousness from retaining that in which you would otherwise be depleting yourself of. And it's an interesting experience. That's, I don't want to have this segue into that. And it was something that I shared in a prior video. I never researched, I never looked up, but it was something that God wanted me to do, basically, from video recommendation that I never would, it was not a subject that I spoke about or did any of that, it wasn't something that was on my mind or, but what you learn is it's actually getting you back into alignment within your highest self, just retaining all of your energy that you were just depleting yourself of. Okay. And then the last one is substances, because that's the final nail in the coffin of mental health. As in, I remember during my rat life job, I was coping with smoking cigars that I didn't link to high stress and the heart issues that I had. I didn't correlate the two. I was just like, I love cigars, I'm giving myself one. And some days it was just like, when I was really stressed, I was like, man, I need one. I was doing it like once a week, and then I was doing it like once every 2 days, 2 or 3 days. And after that job was done, I was like, I don't have any desire for one right now. I was like, they're fine, I don't mind them, but I was like, I don't feel the need at all. And I'm at this stage right now where the last thing that I want, there's only one scenario where I want to do drugs in the future, and it would be with MDMA with my woman. That is like the one experience that I would love to do in whatever future from now, other than that single instance. And not to talk about drugs, but if you've ever done that, there's an incredible sensation when you're in an environment where you feel completely safe to let go. And I say MDMA and not ecstasy because ecstasy, you can't not dance. You can't not dance. And there's that rolling feel. I don't want to sell anybody on the magic of drugs, but I was like, I have no interest to do psychedelics for the rest of my life. When I was younger, I wanted to do ayahuasca. I've done mushrooms. But I was like, I don't want to do any of this. I don't give a shit about smoking. I could go the rest of my life without smoking ever again. I have no interest in alcohol. Because of the high level of stress and the high level of anxiety that everyone is subject to within the world today, how they're coping is from the dopamine from scrolling, where other things you don't even feel good anymore. And I've had to reflect on that. My nervous system has kind of felt broken. From not truly being able to feel the same joy and happiness as I had when I was younger, prior to the person that I had to create in order to survive my last season. Season of heartbreak, season of work, season of refinement with God. The target that I had to build, the inner child that I had to bury, it left me with a very very, very broken nervous system, to where it came across on my feed just yesterday on Instagram, by no coincidence, I'm sure, of a dysregulated nervous system, to where you can't even feel good, like the pathways or something, where you don't even get that drip of reward, where wow, this feels good, wow, this, and that I remember when I lost that, even with substances, where I would take ecstasy and I wouldn't even feel ecstasy. I wouldn't feel ecstatic in any way. And that is such a depressing place to be, when you take something because you're trying to escape the reality that you're miserable in, the life that you don't like, and even in that altered state, you don't feel good. That is the low. That's a very, very deep low. And most people, I remember meeting this girl in Barcelona who had done heroin, and I was so intrigued by it, because I love to hear people's experiences. And I was like, how was it? And she was like, well, I was in a professional setting, as in I was with a professional, heroin user. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess if you're going to do it, best case. She was like, right? But she only took like a tiny drag, and I learned that you could smoke it. He was so deep, and she said it felt like she was in this dungeon. It was a terrifying experience for her. And she looked at him and she said, I can only imagine where he is, because of how much that he had taken, and how hard it was for her to sort of, climb out of that, and very, very scary for her to climb out of that. She said, I can't even imagine how he is ever going to climb out of that. And then when you reflect on success stories of people like Robert Downey Jr., who had overcome a heroin addiction, you're just like, they were in that abyss. I remember meeting another guy who did heroin in Albania, and I asked him to describe the experience. He was like, do you know the sirens from, and I was like, yeah, from Greek mythology. He was like, they were calling to me. The ones who lure sailors to their death, I said, "Jeez, what are you doing?" Crazy. But my point is, that's the last thing that people turn to cope. And I didn't even know it, but I was turning to cigars in order to cope with all the stress from my last job. Most people, they'll cope with scrolling, they'll cope with swiping on dating apps, they'll cope with drinking, drugging, smoking, drinking, drugging, smoking, all of it. And depleting themselves and using the pornography and hooking up casually. And so what happens is you separate yourself from your divinity. You separate yourself from your highest self. You separate yourself from your godlike self, your Christ mirror in consciousness. And you can cement your slavery forever. And that's the biggest nail in the coffin, as in what I love about Rat Life, and thank you guys, whoever's checked out escapetheratlife.com, I really appreciate it. I put in the entry to the garden, you're charged with not escaping your life. Anybody can do that. Anyone can go into an altered state, can get high, can get drunk, faded, and escape their rat life temporarily until they sober up and they go back into that life of fucking misery and desperation. They said you are charged with forging a life you need no escape from. And that's why I created the garden. We're trying to create a life where we're free to speak the truth, geographic freedom, financial freedom, relational freedom, spiritual ascension, energetic conservation, our connection heightened with God. That's freedom. To live as ourselves, as our authentic selves, speaking our truth, not playing a character, not wearing a mask of someone we're pretending to be. So, all food for thought. Focus on an enemy, and I put, when I spar, roll in martial arts, and your villain. So, I learned this from Andrew Tate several years ago, and now I understand it in real time from my own application. When I spar with someone, when I roll with someone like I did today in jiu-jitsu, it's very clear who my enemy is, who my opponent is, right? Very, very clear. But outside of an arena, outside of the ring, the mat, you don't know who your enemy is. And we talked about the importance of identifying your enemy. And he said, and Andrew says in the video, some of you might think I'm your enemy. And he said, I'm not. He said, when I left fighting, and my opponent would always make me better because of iron sharpening iron, okay? This person or these professional fighters, they force the other person to level up, to work harder, to train harder, to do more, the output is higher. When you go from high school varsity to college, it's another level. You have to level up just to compete. Iron sharpens iron. They bring out the best of you, okay? Absent that competitive atmosphere, you lose that sharpening. So what do you do? He said, you need to create your own villain. And he said, who is your villain? He said, this is someone you're going to create. Your villain is the best possible version of yourself. As in, the villain is you that always wakes up early and never hits snooze. It's the person who always goes to the gym, they never miss a workout. It's the person who's always pristine and perfect with their diet. It's the person who's always doing the content, whatever, for your business. The person who's always giving 100%, who, to quote Greg Plitt, not the person who, dusts around a picture frame, but when he's dusting and cleaning, he picks the motherfucker up and does the job right. He does the job right or not at all. Your villain is the guy who never cuts corners, who never half-asses, who always gives 1,010%, who never shies away from going up to somebody that they like or find attractive or beautiful. He's never a coward. He's never led by fear. And he said, the beauty about this is that person is you, because you all have the potential to be that person. And you can use Christ as another example. He's the ultimate mirror of the potential that we have to operate and reside as. And when I think of it, I don't think of it as Christ, Christian, or Catholic. I think of somebody with the utmost generosity, compassion, integrity, understanding, patience, right? The ultimate, somebody who would kiss the feet of the enemy, somebody who would forgive the person or say to God while he's, getting nailed, to the cross saying, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." That's the ultimate pinnacle of someone that we can, strive to be. Someone who I don't think I'll ever be within my experience within this life. But the point is, that's who your villain is. And he said, but now when you go, you'll always compare yourself to that villain if you're conscious of it. As in, when you don't want to go and you have nobody holding you accountable, you'll be like, well, my villain went to the gym today. He woke up early today. And then you actually get to visualize the version of reality that you could be living, what car you could be driving, what woman you could be having, what life you could be leading if you had that same standard. And that's the whole exercise, is creating the version of yourself, your dream life that you want, and then asking yourself and trying to visualize, well, what does that person look like? How do they walk? How do they speak? And what's so cool is the game is just closing that gap, right? Maybe you're not there right now, but that's someone who you absolutely can become. Why? Because all of the tasks that they're doing are possible for you to do. There's a quote from Jim Rohn. He said, success is easy. He said, they're all just tasks that are easy to do. He said, but what's the caveat? They're easy not to do. Got it? So it's food for thought. I did it when I was early, when I first heard it. I loved that idea, creating a villain. But the best exercise that you could do is write down your dream life. And right now, especially through my clarity, from my spiritual ascension, from my lack of depletion, from my, where I am on my journey, on my walk home, so much things just become irrelevant to you. So many things become bullshit. So much becomes just noise. And you say, what do you actually want? Well, I just want freedom. I just want to be able to provide for myself and for my family. I just want a family, my wife, my future children, my dog. What you want is actually just the only things that actually matter. And the only toy that I want is my Mustang in the next 2 years, is when I'm done with my hero's journey of what I'm doing right now, and I go back to living in California. That's the only material thing that I want. Other than that one item, I don't give a shit about any other materialistic thing. And so it's very, very interesting. You might have all of these things that you want. I want this thing, I want this status, I want it. And when you're so much this way on your path, all of that shit dissolves. And you're just like, these things are nice, but who gives a shit? Because you're no longer trying to gain external validation, significance from external validation. And you're also not trying to get, what's the other one? Significance, external validation, and you don't give a fuck about what people think about you. You're not trying to impress anyone, And when you're at that stage where you're so secure and happy and in serenity within yourself, and you're in flow and you're in obedience to what God has called you to do, all of that goes to the wayside. So, but it's a great exercise to do, just to begin to be able to visualize and step into your dream life. So I highly recommend it if you've never done that. What do I want my life to look like in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years? What is my dream life? And most people who don't even know what their dream life is, and they haven't dared to even visualize that. Again, what is the topic of this? You cannot fight unless you can identify your enemy, but flip the script. You can't get to a destination that you can't define. As in, you don't have to get there tomorrow, but you can give yourself direction to get there. You know what I'm saying? And goals will change over time because you change over time. But if you don't give yourself that gift of direction, then you're just lost. And then you just drift your entire life. And then you'll be at the whim to circumstance and condition on your path. Okay. Every growth reveals itself in the seeking out of a powerful opponent or problem. For a philosopher who is warlike also challenges problems to a duel. The undertaking requires one to bring all his strength to master equal opponents. And it's the whole idea of iron sharpening iron. Iron sharpening iron. But I thought that was a really cool quote. Don't depend on the enemy not coming. We talked about this. Depend rather on being ready for him, from Sun Tzu. And I put my observation of the professional fighters in the gym. So I observed that today. So my jiu-jitsu class was right after the 4:00 professional fighters training, which I wonder if before I leave here, if I'll get the opportunity to train with them. It'd be so cool. Caesar, my coach, he joked about that today, and I was like, there's nothing that they, especially with the boxing, I could hold my own. With the striking, like the kicking and the wrestling, they would, probably decimate me. But at least with the training aspect of it, there's nothing that they're doing that I can't do, especially in a short amount of time, especially with the coaching that I'm getting right now. But my observation of them was they're so sharp. They train twice a day, every single day, and they're ready at any time for a fight. You know what I'm saying? And that's all of them. They're all keeping each other so sharp, so cardio conditioned, so strength conditioned, so, focused. So at their strongest, they're not half-assing, they're not cutting corners. And I observe that in real time. Don't depend on the enemy not coming, depend rather on being ready for him. These are the kind of people who they're operating as that man in the arena, ready at any time, at any point in their day, in their week, in their life, to look into any of life's coming storms, to shout, "Do your worst, for I will do mine." I observe that in real time in Argentina. All right, the next thing is read page 10 in my Brazil observation. So there's two things that I want to read, and I'm a pretty quick reader. It was so beautiful that I was like, I can't just take a note on this. I'm going to read it in its entirety. And this is the kind of beauty that you can expect from this kind of book. It's one of the excerpts that are just on the side. So I'm just going to read this. It's not very long. Not the actual this itself, but it's one of the gifts that Robert Greene gives with the book, are quotes and stories that are on the side, just to add so much depth to the lesson or to the interpretation. And I put this in all caps. I said, read all. As one travels up any one of the large rivers, one meets with tribes that are successfully more warlike. In the coast regions are peaceful communities which never fight, save in self-defense, and then with but poor success, whereas in the central regions, where the rivers take the rise, are a number of extremely warlike tribes whose raids have been a constant source of terror to the communities settled in the lower reaches of the rivers. It might be supposed that the peaceful coast people would be found to be superior in moral qualities to their more warlike neighbors, but the contrary is the case. In almost all respects, the advantage lies with the warlike tribes. Their houses are better built, larger and cleaner. Their domestic morality is superior. They are physically stronger, are braver, and physically and mentally more active, and in general are more trustworthy. But above all, their social organization is firmer and more efficient because their respect for and obedience to their chiefs and their loyalty to their community are much greater. Each man identifies himself with the whole community and accepts and loyally performs the social duties laid upon him. And I was like, 1,000%. 1,000%. And there's a quote I saw a long time ago. It said every politician should be required to do a fight or to go to the gym or send their son to war. And then the world would be very, very different. And it's so evident. The quality and depth of a leader who's an actual leader, who has that warlike skill. Like when I think of a general of antiquity, who was a fighter himself, who was leading his army, who was in the trenches, not one of these cucks today, not one of these serpents, and these very, very weak individuals that are all in prominent positions of authority and leadership today. And for that very reason, you think that these people have the assumption higher, superior morality, and it's like, no. They don't know what integrity is. They don't know what perseverance is. They don't know what heart is. They don't know what real work ethic is. They don't know what loyalty is. They don't know what respect is, because it was never earned through sweat and through blood and through challenge and through adversity. These are very soft and therefore very weak individuals and people. And so you learn that the best leaders of a community are those chieftains of a war. I observed that in real time in Brazil. These titans, these black belts, 6th degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, Para, who owns a fight house, I just observed, I went to coffee with Marcelo, who's my boxing coach, who's also a black belt in Muay Thai and in jiu-jitsu. And we're walking from the coffee place to the gym, about to go train, about to spar. And dude, he's talking to everybody. He's talking to the mechanic, he's talking to the coffee shop, he's going behind the fucking coffee shop to the guy, and then he's serving himself, kind of like the level of love, of respect, of being a protector, not just for yourself or for your intermediate family, but for your entire, to extend that stewardship over your entire community. You only get that from these kind of people who have that sense of duty, obligation, integrity, and honor and character. And it's from that merit. And I was able to observe that in real time. It's from people who know the pain and hardship and adversity of war. Of, you go into this guy's gym, he shows me pictures on one of my first days of all of these stills of him in the cage in actual fights. And then he also just happens to be in Brazil special operations. And you're just like, what? And he's the most humble and kind and just a freaking sweetheart of a guy. But the epitome of a leader, and the complete contrast of the ultimate killer and the ultimate gentle person who takes not just himself, but the selflessness of taking on a family and children and a wife and girlfriend and one at a time, I think, and then taking on his gym that he runs, and then taking on all of the students that come into those classes and the other superiors, but then also his community at large. And it's just like, that is from that exact quote. So that's why I wanted to share that, because you don't get that same level of selflessness from people who don't have that intrinsic integrity and character. You know what I'm saying? And those are the people who, there's a good video of one of the leaders of Poland in a boxing arena. He's going to meet with his military, and then they're going and they're doing their training, and he's training with them. It's like, that's a fucking leader. That is a leader, man. That is a guy, that is somebody who I will follow. Do you know what I'm saying? Not these ones who are scheming and doing all of this garbage, but for those qualities that you can only get through the fire of combat. Okay. Instead of internalizing a bad situation, externalize it and face your enemy. It is the only way out. And I put through. I learned that from my job, my last rat life job. And one of my angels, she told me this. She said, Tarek, the only way out is through. And that was what gave me the strength to persevere until. So to reread, instead of internalizing a bad situation, externalize it and face your enemy. It is the only way out through. You can use things like anger, things like depression, things like heartbreak. You can alchemize that infinite energy and use it as fuel to persevere through. Simple as that. It's up to you. Most people, they won't galvanize it. They won't alchemize it. They'll be destroyed by it. They'll get all this anger, and then they'll take all of it, they'll internalize all of it, and then they'll project it on friends and family and loved ones, versus taking all of this and having that fuck you, watch this kind of an energy. That is how you can use all of these seemingly terrible circumstances and conditions within your life as a gift. As, no, this happened for me because it gave me unlimited motivation, unlimited anger and drive to persevere and get the fuck out of this life that I don't want to live anymore. Okay. Read page 12 to 13, and I put, knowledge is a quote from Frederick Douglass. Knowledge unfits a child to be a slave. When I read this, oh my God, this was poetry. Okay, there's two sides to this. I'm going to read it as quickly as I can. The frequent hearing of my mistress reading the Bible, for she often read aloud when her husband was absent, soon awakened my curiosity and respect to this mystery of reading, and roused in me the desire to learn. So this is Frederick Douglass, the slave, talking about his mistress teaching him how to read. Mistress, not somebody who was sleeping with. I learned and gleaned from this. Mistress, instead of the master who runs the house, that guy's wife. Having no fear of my kind mistress before my eyes, she had given me no reason to fear. I frankly asked her to teach me to read, and without hesitation the dear woman began the task, and very soon by her assistance I was master of the alphabet and could spell words of 3 or 4 letters. Master Hugh was amazed at the simplicity of his spouse. I love that, at the simplicity of his spouse. Oh my God, that is so well said for what I'm going to continue to read. And probably for the first time, he unfolded to her the true philosophy of slavery and the peculiar rules necessary to be observed by masters and mistresses in their management of their human chattels. Mr. Auld promptly forbade the continuance of her reading instruction, telling her in the first place that the thing itself was unlawful, that it was also unsafe, and could only lead to mischief. Mrs. Auld evidently felt the force of his remarks, and like an obedient wife, began to shape her course in the direction indicated by her husband. The effect of his words on me was neither slight nor transitory. His iron sentences, cold and harsh, sunk deep into my heart, and stirred up not only my feelings into a sort of rebellion, but awakened within me a slumbering train of vital thought. It was a new and special revelation, dispelling a painful mystery, against which my youthful understanding had struggled and struggled in vain, to wit, the white man's power to perpetuate the enslavement of the black man. Very well, thought I, knowledge unfits a child to be a slave. I instinctively assented to the proposition, and from that moment I understood the direct pathway from slavery to freedom. This was just what I needed, and I got it at a time and from a source whence I least expected it. Wise as Mr. Auld was, he evidently underrated my comprehension, and had little idea of the use to which I was capable of putting the impressive lesson he was giving to his wife. That which he most loved, I most hated. And the very determination which he expressed to keep me in ignorance only rendered me the more resolute in seeking intelligence. Oh my God. When I read that, dude, I was just like, wow. It was just, because you're an illiterate, ignorant slave. Can't even read, don't even know the alphabet. And then you're able to write like that. It's just, oh my, it was so beautiful. It was so well said. And he said, the reflection of he observed the husband. I couldn't believe the simplicity of the wife, and that was the first time I read that kind of went over my head. The simplicity of myself versus how could she be so naive not to be able to see that she's educating and arming these slaves to be intellectually cognizant of the absurdity of their confines and of their slavery. And for that very, very quote, knowledge unfits a child to be a slave. Why was that so prevalent for me writing this? It's the same thing within the rat life. It's the same thing with your spiritual freedom. It's the same thing with your connection to God. Knowledge unfits a child of God to be a slave. I'm gonna just, let me put God in there. Knowledge unfits a child of God to be a slave. As in, when you're indoctrinated into a life of perpetual slavery, of operating in the lowest frequencies and the lowest vibrations and the lowest resonances, anger, bitterness, despair, hatred for everyone around you, shame, the lowest one, that cord is severed. And then when you buy into all of the bullshit and that I did for most of them, credit card debt, student loan debt, car financing, and then most people, they'll get a mortgage on top of that. You're drowning in all of this debt. And these motherfuckers that have been able to do this usury for every play, that's a whole nother topic, but they've made slavery worldwide by getting to these positions of authority and then being able to do this with every sort of system, and especially the financial system, and keep people in slavery, in debt, in perpetuity, having to work for necessity, indebted to them. Who are they? The ones who own these institutions and these banks, indebted to another for the rest of your life. And then you're always chasing a carrot. You're saying, no, when I pay off my credit cards that have fucking 28% interest, no, once I pay off my car note that I need to work a job, no, once I pay off my student loans. My professor of archaeology at UCLA, she was in her late 50s, 60s. She showed me, I'm still paying off these pieces of paper to this day. And it was her master's, her PhD. It's a lifetime of debt. Why? Because the number in itself isn't very big. Oh man, I just have a $2,000 credit limit. Why is it maxed out all the time? It's because the minimum payment that I'm putting to it isn't going to principal, it's going to interest. So the principal is never going down. And the balance of it isn't going down because you're also combating your cost of living. So it's like, okay, I have $40,000 in student loans, I have these credit cards, I have this car financing, I have a mortgage on top of this, and my cost of living is to be here, to live, to exist, is $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. To have a family, to have a wife, to have kids, to have a dog. And And so you're just like, wow, so I can only pay the fucking minimum one here. And I had to reason that within my failure of starting a business, of doing rat life, where I was just like, I can pay this debt back. I just can't afford to live. No problem. So I lived in my car for 93 days to pay off $8,500 in debt, because otherwise if I had my own apartment, I would never have that margin to be able to pay this fucking debt down. And they know this. You know what I'm saying? Right now I'm in Argentina. My cost of living, without all of the debt that I'm getting bled by every month, my cost of living just here for accommodation, 4 weeks, 27 nights. I know 4 weeks is 28, but I booked it the January 5th, and then my last day in this place is the February 1st. 27 nights. It was $435. $435 for a fucking month. Versus in California, it's my apartment, one bedroom apartment, is $2,500 fucking dollars. Don't even have a washer in unit. I had to pay for it in the complex, and then you're paying SoCal Edison on top of that for your electricity and for your air conditioning. You're paying gas, water, sewage. That's also tacked on to the rent. And then you are working a job. If you live in Southern California or any Western United States, you're driving to work more often than not, unless you live in an area that has public transportation, which is just the East Coast. But that shit doesn't. There's no fucking public transportation that you're taking efficiently anywhere else. So you have the car that you're paying for, you have car insurance that you're required to have, you have gas that you have to pay for, you have the registration is another made-up tax that you have to pay on that car every single year, and then all of that is tacked on to the rent, sewage, trash, water, on top of the SoCal Edison, and that's all tacked on to the phone bill and the gym membership and the clothes and the food, and that's just to survive. It's just to fucking be. Do you understand? And then you tack on debt on top of that. That's how they make you a slave for life. And so what is the soliloquy? Knowledge unfits a child of God to be a slave. As in, I would do the math and I would say, fuck this. They would cherry pick whose student loans would be able to get absolved completely. And I said, the whole thing is bullshit. If you can just say this person, oh, you don't have student loan debt anymore, the whole thing is made up. There are numbers on a screen that you can take away anytime that you're choosing not to. How can you cherry pick somebody who can be a slave and who's not? And then it's the awareness of that you understand. Knowledge unfits Tariq to be a slave. And so you go into places where the cost of living is a sixth the cost of living. Is that right? A sixth? A fifth? 1/5. Yeah, it's actually a sixth. Yeah, when you tack on everything else, 1/6 the fucking cost of living. You know what I'm saying? To be able to have a better margin, to be able to climb your way out of fucking slavery forever. But most people who reside and are led by fear, they will never be free. And what I've learned from observation is when you deem freedom not possible, what you'll do is you'll take on even more debt that will give you an illusion of freedom because you have breathing room. The mortgage is the best example of that, where you're just like, my current rent is $2,500 a month, but if I get a mortgage and I refinance it, then I can bring my rent to $1,500 per month. That's an extra $1,000 of breathing room I have. Oh man, I'm free, I can breathe again. No, I just added 30 years of slavery, a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, 6% interest, or whatever the fuck the interest rate is now. I'm a slave for life. No, but Target's an investment. No. You have debt that you're obligated to pay. You have geographical freedom that is forfeit. You are right here in this one place. You are a slave for life. And I'm not talking about when you can play the real estate game, when you have these higher things. What I'm talking about is just existing and living within the rat life. A normal person working a 9 to 5. Knowledge unfits a child of God to be a slave. But if you don't have things like financial literacy, which is what I love about escapetheratlife.com and this university, and the books that we've discussed, if you don't have that awareness and that mindset, if you don't have the tools and ammunition to combat the deception and treachery and abuse that you're going to be privy to within your work life and within the rat life, from reading the 48 Laws of Power, from reading War and the 33 strategies of them, then your mental health is going to be decimated. If you don't have the awareness of all the ways that they're intentionally harming your mental health, from the sleep deprivation, from the substances, from the pornography, from all of this garbage, then you won't know, wow, why do I feel so miserable and depressed? Why do I have such a lack of energy? Why is it so hard for me why do I have a depressed body? Why am I aching? Oh, it's because I'm playing a character that's not me. My body's saying, fuck you to this character that you keep on insisting. My soul is on fire, not being able to speak the truth. Having to tiptoe through the tulips, walk on eggshells around all of these serpents and these demons that I'm subject to. When you have that intelligence and that awareness, there's an anger that drives you because you're just like, there's no world where I'm spending my one fucking life as a slave. for a lifetime in perpetuity. A debt, working for someone else, working for necessity, this soul on fire. I said, fuck, I would rather go completely broke. I would rather risk it all. I would rather die than be a slave for life in my one that I have. And when you have that resolve, God, the fates, they conspire to say, we best step aside, for we are powerless against this kind of resolve. It's a quote from Jim Rohn, My Philosophy for Successful Living. And unless you have that resolve within yourself that I'm not going to lead a life of fear, I'm not going to be led by fear, and I'm not going to live a life of slavery. Unless you have that fire in the tank, you're never going to be free. Not for the overused quote, no one is going to save you, but because it's too hard. The journey ahead is, the fight and the battle is too hard. That if you're not willing to save and fight to save yourself by any means necessary, as in to cope with the stress, dude, I turned to cigars. I turned to, when I was depleting myself before my current streak of retention, I would just do it to be able to sleep better. Just for any sort of mental relief and clarity and just calm amidst life's storms. Like whatever I had to do that I could think of at the time to combat abuse and bullying and harassment and all of this garbage, and the financial burden and stress that's weighing on you. And you're just like, how the fuck am I going to be free? I'm trying so hard to get out of this debt. And it just feels like I'm just climbing deeper and deeper into it because that's how it's set up. That's why these motherfuckers are, was it 100 plus countries and counting now? Story for another time. But to end, that's all I wanted to share now is, number one, I want to thank everybody who checked out escapetheratlife.com. I want to thank everybody who checked out signing up as a member to the garden. It's awesome. And the thought that I had within that, because I want to make it, what I love about my garden, in our garden now on escapetheratlife.com, is it's an environment that cuts out all the negativity, all of the no's, all of the rejection, all of the excuses, all of the distractions, all of the social media, all of the bullshit. That you have blinders on in this beautiful garden where I've pulled out all of the weeds. But it's also a place where the requirement is that you be yourself, and that the whole goal is to walk ourselves home to our authentic self. And I have it within the videos and everything that I've put in there, of just true transparency and true honesty and true accountability and true truth. And that's it. And I thought, how can I do that even more and better? And this was an idea that I had yesterday that I'm so fucking thrilled about. I was watching a video of Tony Robbins interviewed by Alex Hormozy. I was putting away my laundry while I was listening to this. And Alex Hormozy, he's going on to be a $1 billion net worth individual, but there was a clear lack of happiness and fulfillment within his life. And Tony Robbins picked up on this immediately. And he said, you need to do something you need to go to something that lights you up, that just puts your soul on fire and brings you with so much excitement and joy in this, just from contribution. And that's something that's been missing so long in my life because I'm no longer personal training people, I'm no longer online coaching people. And so I haven't had that sense of, contribution. And I asked myself, I said, because Tony says, what is something that like you would love to even do for free? And I asked myself, when have I been my most happiest within my life? And it was two or three different times. The first time was when I put out my phone number on Instagram, and I said, this was a few years ago, and I said, call a stranger, it might change your life. And people from all over the world would call me. And the first ones, they were like kids, be like, wait, you're an actual person? He, and then they would hang up. And then what I learned was, then people would call me and they would have anger behind their voice. Like, what makes you qualified to put out your phone number and say, this? And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? They were like, well, what certificates and what's your credentials? And I was just like, I don't need any fucking credentials to say, call a stranger, it might change your life. But those were the people that I learned were the most unhealed and who were the most afraid to let go. And the reason that I knew that is because then I would get the people who actually met me with complete vulnerability and complete honesty and complete courage. And I think doing it over phone calls, you get anonymity, as in I'm not there, I'm not standing right in front of you. And you have the opportunity for some people the first time within a lot of their lives to be seen, to feel heard, to be recognized, and to be in an environment where they're not met with judgment, condemnation, or criticism. Exactly the the garden that I'm cultivating, or that I've created within escapethroughlife.com. And I loved it. I loved the courage, and I loved the vulnerability, and I loved the tears that I would hear on the other end, because of the transformation that I knew was on the other side. This battery's gonna die, let me change it 1 second. And I enjoyed it so much, and some of those conversations were hours long. It was so fulfilling, and I was happy to do it for free. And I asked myself, what other time have I been happy? And I remember I met people upon traveling, and we would share WhatsApp audio messages. And some of them were 5 minutes in length, and then they would grow to be, over an hour in length. And I love those so much. And the reason that I love those even more than the phone calls is because when you're listening to an audio message, it forces you to listen. It forces you to listen to an entire piece by someone before you can interject and reply, versus a back and forth of conversation. And not to say that conversations don't have a faster feedback loop, as in I present this, you challenge this, and then we work around that. But just to be in an environment where, and I love the imagery of this, it's two people walking in a garden. And it's when you walk in a garden, you're not rushed. You're taking your time, you're absorbing the beauty, you're identifying your enemies, the weeds that are in there, the limiting beliefs, the fears, the insecurities, the behaviors that are holding you back from taking this action, whatever. And together, through being that mirror, we can identify what those things are that are keeping you from leading this extraordinary life that's on the other side of facing your fear. And I loved doing those. I asked myself, what was the other one? The other one was when I would have the conversations in person. So just before I left, I had a 4-hour conversation with one of my coworkers, and I know this isn't arrogance by me saying, but I know it was a life-changing conversation for him. I had one in Brazil when I was there in 2023. It was a 6-hour conversation with a woman. It's one of the best conversations I've ever had in my life. And, sorry for the noise, I loved all of those things. And so I from the inspiration from that video, I was like, I want to do that again. So this is an open invitation. And it's also, I love that I'm able to, and the idea that I had is we're going to walk each other, or we're walking each other home. But the whole tie-in with escapethroughlife.com and the garden that I'm trying to create and this, but within the phone calls and the WhatsApp audio message, it's your garden that we're walking in together. So there's an open invitation. I don't know if anybody's gonna take me up on this, but anybody who wants to leave me a WhatsApp audio message, send me a DM on Instagram, and then I will give you my phone number, my actual one. And then you can send me a WhatsApp audio message of any length. I will listen to the entire thing, and then we will go from there. It just might change your life. So that's an open invitation. I know one person might send it, but I love that so much, and it fills me with such happiness and such fulfillment, such joy. So I'm doing it selfishly and selflessly, to give somebody everything that I've learned over the last 13 years of my journey. In any category, whether you have a problem within your relationships or your physique or your, the route life that you're working or the dream life that you're not leading. Usually what I've noticed with people, their biggest problem typically is around a relationship and overcoming that heartbreak and navigating those waters. The last conversation actually I had with Yago on Instagram, or it was recent, it was like a month or two ago. It was just that. And what's cool is I've noticed in every single one of these variations, whether it's through text message, like say through Instagram, whether it's through the audio messages, through WhatsApp, or a phone call, or in person, my gift of articulation is heightened, unlike it ever has been or can be. And it's because I'm in complete alignment with what God has called me to do. And there's a reason that nothing fills me with greater happiness than being on the other end of those conversations or of those phone calls. It fills me with so much. I'm so happy to do this for free. And I don't get me wrong, I've been paid to coach people before, not just through fitness, but like I would sell. I remember the last time I did this, I was in Venice, and I would sell 1 hour, one-on-one coaching sessions with people. This is something that I'm happy to do for free. So if anybody wants to take me up on this, it could be anything. You could just be venting about a problem. You could just be telling me about your day. You could just be saying hi for the sake of saying hi. But I want to open it to anybody. So if you're interested, you can leave a comment on here, but it'd be better if you just DM me on Instagram at @TarekHaux, and then I'll give you my phone number, and then you can send me a WhatsApp audio message. Because I'm in Argentina and you're on a different time zone, and I don't have data on my phone when I go outside, so I only have internet through Wi-Fi. I didn't get a SIM card. I don't want to do phone calls here, but I would love to do WhatsApp audio messages. So if you're interested, let me know. Thank you guys for checking out escapethroughoutlife.com. Thank you for anyone who signs up in the garden of escapethroughoutlife.com. I really appreciate it. The support is obviously directly supporting me to continue on my noble quest and my journey. Right now I'm in Argentina. That is the end of the first strategy of war. Declare war on your enemies. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, what is rat life? Anyone can escape. Anyone can be free. Anyone can be traveling the world. Anyone can live their dream life. Anyone can escape their life of fucking slavery. It starts with belief and the courage to pursue. And that courage starts with this first law, identifying your enemies. Because if you don't identify what the problem is, what's keeping you bound, what's keeping you a slave, it could be just knowledge, it could be just ignorance, it could be just a lack of literacy. It could be a naivety on who your fucking enemy is. In my past job, some of my coworkers who were getting fucking milked to the very end. And some of them, one of them I can think in particular, might still be there in a position that they were so overqualified for, but that these superiors, they know that. They know that this person is irreplaceable in this position. That if I promote this person to a manager, it would be impossible to fill her shoes. And so we're gonna milk this person until we can't milk them any longer. But if you don't have that awareness of your value, and you don't have that fire and anger to escape a place that would keep you forever dimmed from shining your light, from reaching your full potential, from actualizing your dreams and your goals, then that is where you're going to spend the rest of your days. You're going to lead a quiet life of desperation. And anybody who is affiliated with Tarek House, with escapetherattlife.com, with Rat Life, it is freedom or nothing. It is freedom or death. Do you know what I'm saying? Is I would rather die than live a life of slavery. And so anybody who's aligned with that, who that resonates with, you are the people who I would love to invite to send me an audio message or to join me in the garden at escapetherattlife.com. That is what Rat Life is. Freedom. Plain and simple. And with that, we're all going to take care. Check on you guys later. Bye.